opposition members, we are ready, should the packed government wish to utilize our considerable experiences to assist on this or any other matter that they are grappling with. I thank you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Ralph Lewis, Caymanian Times, and thank you for inviting us here today. Mr. Roy, the option leader, you sound very concerned that not enough is being done with the reopening plans. What can be the consequences that you would speak of if that didn't happen very soon?
I fear at this point, Ralph, for primarily a lot of the restaurants that continue to suffer and the thousands of Caymanians who remain unemployed in the tourism sector. I think if the longer that we can continue this situation continues now, the harder it will be for businesses that are affected by the continued closure of our borders to survive. They are just struggling along, and many will tell you there are days when they only have served 1 or 2 meals in their restaurants. They're closing more and more days, and in order to push the business into, make it as active as possible when they are open, because of the cost of remaining open and not having business coming in. So I'm concerned for the businesses and concerned for our people who now have been without work and unable to earn a full living for, better part now of 15, 16 months. They've got mortgages to pay. They've got loans to service. They have got, all the normal business expenses that you and I have. Yes. And yet still they are while they're being helped by the stipend, it is far short of what they are accustomed to earning every month. And so we think that there are dangers there with regard to, further economic loss to them. And some are likely to tip over the edge, so to speak, when it comes to servicing a mortgage.
As the former Minister of Finance, what would you say about the government's finances with the loss of revenue that would have come in from tourism and other sectors?
Well, the amount of revenue that comes in from tourism every year is quite significant when you add up the various revenue sources. It is many tens of millions of dollars, and we saw that go literally to zero in March last year. But happily, the experience certainly through to the end of December last year, when we ended up the year with a deficit of only $38 million, showed me how much our financial services industry really took up a lot of the slack, and how our construction and development industry as well, and the real estate industry, how well they have been performing since the arrival of COVID. So those things have very much compensated, but you still have an entire industry that is shut down. One leg of our economy is still shut down with nothing coming in. So it is extremely important to us. It will be extremely important to us in terms of recovering and government's finances and allowing us from moving into a deficit into a surplus situation, and thereby restoring our financial health and well-being. So it's absolutely critical.
One more question. We're in hurricane season, and God forbid something happens. With a date of September 1st, we have to be realistic. And do you think that 10 weeks is enough for us to get to that point? Is there any leeway that you'll be willing to give regarding having some flexibility in the reopening, maybe a further 4 months to October 1?
What I would say to you is we put forward our suggestions. Right. It's up to the government to take it and decide how they wish to, whether to accept or whether they want to change a date or to make make it later, make it earlier. We don't mind. Okay. What we want is to hear and to know what the plans are. When can we expect? The tourism sector have told us, the hotels have told us, it will take them 6 to 8 weeks in order to ramp up in terms of the hiring of staff and training of staff to be ready to receive tourists. Let's remember too that we have one major hotel that is closed and will be so through probably to the end of November. So, the numbers that will be starting to come back in. If we go even with a September date, will be quite modest as we build up to the end of the year and into what would be the high tourism season, and commencing in December and going through to say the end of April.
Okay, thank you. I'll give way to my other colleagues.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Right.
Wendy Ledger, Cayman News Service. You're saying September 1st, but you've also just sort of clarified that. Do you still believe, like you all used to, data before dates? Because we've seen what happened in the UK, set a date, stuff happens, everything changes. So what's your position? Is it data or dates?
Can you ask the question again?
Data or dates?
Can I take that?
Yeah, no, please go ahead.
I think what the leader has made very clear is that this date is reviewed by the science itself, and he pointed out that the 75 to 80% vaccination was the most important part of making sure that the people of the country are safe, and this is what has been put forward by UK Health and Dr. Lee when it talks about a certain percentage with herd immunity. So, as the leader said, if there is a different date, obviously they would come forward and they would use best practice to listen to what the science has said. When you look at what has been presented here today, it has been based on the information that has been given publicly to us.
So in other words, you're calculating 1st of September as being the point where, all things being equal, everybody would have had their second, or up to around 80% of people would have had their second dose.
That's what the numbers show us.
Right, okay, so you're not considering the possibility of another variant or another outbreak or anything like that. That's just purely based on herd immunity.
It's based on what
Based
has been
on the variants that we have at the minute.
because of the Pfizer vaccine being the one that has been successful against variants. It has been what has been publicly said, that Pfizer is the one that is the most efficient as far as fighting, and is the 96th percentile. So again, we have used the information that's been given, and that's how the leader.
Okay.
I don't think you can wait. I don't think we can sit and wait to see if another variant comes out before
Right.
we set an opening date. But we certainly feel that September 1st is enough time, and certainly given the general public, that target to get vaccinated in itself is important. And of course, the game changer here is now that the vaccine is available to the 12 to 16-year-olds. That's going to boost our numbers even more. We've already been satisfied, even prior to the elections, that our most vulnerable, we've reached the targets of our most vulnerable being vaccinated. Now we think that the opportunity is here, and certainly achievable, even earlier than September 1st, to reach the population numbers that we would like to see vaccinated, including the 12 to 16-year-olds. But we feel that the time given September 1st gives our public, our citizens and residents, an opportunity and time to be vaccinated, and the industry the opportunity to ramp up for an opening.
Okay.
Wendy, if I could follow up on one of Ralph's questions. We were talking about the health of the country itself from a financial point of view. This is really based on protecting the people of the Cayman Islands in a lot of different ways. And when you see almost 4,000 stipends going out, you know that the product mix of our country has to allow opportunity for everybody. So you have 4,000 plus stipends that are showing that we have a big void in our country as far as opportunity for the people. We're looking at how do we take care of this industry, which last year from first spend was over $1 billion. In the 2019, 525,000 arrivals in the cruise. We're saying that we have to protect the industry, number one. And number two, when we look at the health of the economy, where are we from the standpoint of, we have taxi drivers that have no work. We have tour operators that have no work. We have north-sound boat operators that have no work. We have hoteliers, thousands and thousands of Caymanians who don't have work. And then the next question, obviously, is talking about permit holders that are needed to balance out the industry. So I think it's looking at how do we continue to make sure the country's protected, and it has been done by, we introduced the stipends to make sure people had some type of income. They need to continue, they need to be increased. We would...
Can I just pick up on that? At CETA recently, a CETA meeting just a few weeks ago, they made it kind of clear that they were not so keen on the stipend increasing or even continuing because they felt it was hampering their ability to recruit. What's the PPM policy on tourism stipends at the moment in light of that?
Who said they didn't want stipends to be increased?
Marcus and the other guy from Ritz.
So that was the
The executives, basically, the people on the board.
Right.
What they were saying was that they were concerned that whilst they understood, they appreciated the need for the stipends, what they were saying was that they now believed that it could be hampering their ability to recruit because they've been told that they should be recruiting locally, but what they're saying is either people have already gone off to do other things or the stipend is keeping them comfortable with, say, part-time work.
I would disagree with that based on how my phone blows up every morning of the need of the Caymanian people who work in the industry. They depend on the stipend. They are getting by on much less than they made when the industry was buoyant. And the obligation of a government is to make sure opportunity is there for their people and to move forward and rebuild our economy
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate
in
it.
the safest possible way.
Just another question with regards to this. You're right, you brought it up yourself, Mr. McTaggart, in the speech, that the PPM had, that the current, pact had said that the PPM unity government didn't leave a master plan of any kind. Or any kind of proposals, is there a reason why you didn't? Because I think a lot of people used to say all the time, what's the plan, what's the plan? And you all said, well, we kind of got a plan. So I'm just wondering why there wasn't a plan.
Would you like to deal with it? Go ahead.
Wendy, we have set out our plan over and over again, and the leader has set it out again this evening. Reopening was contingent upon getting to a safe number of a percentage of the population vaccinated, between 75 and 80. What we are saying is we are almost there. The government cannot continue in a paralysis of fear. They have to exercise the political judgment that is necessary. We are beyond the point where the science is the key factor in determining the decisions that need to be made. I've talked to enough people around this issue, not just during, but now, who say it's not the science issues that is now preventing the government from making decisions. It is fear. They have to make
Wasn't that the same criticism hurled at you frequently?
No. None of the decisions my government made were based on reasonable fear. Of course, we all feared what could happen to our people if the virus took hold. But our decisions were based on the science and on logic. And we made some very difficult and bold decisions, some which were not at all welcomed by a particular sector of the community. And who wants to have restrictions on their movement and being told when they can go out to the shop or go to the beach? But we took the decisions which have proved right to ensure that the country is COVID-19 safe. But as we've said repeatedly, we cannot continue to live in a cocoon. And having now almost achieved the numbers of vaccinations that will protect the country through herd immunity, the plan should, the decisions ought to be obvious and easy to make. Insist that everyone who comes here is vaccinated. We've got 75 to 80% of our people vaccinated. There is going to be very little risk of COVID-19 taking hold in the community with that level of vaccination and with that additional protection that those who come to visit must be vaccinated or they do the full 14 days in in quarantine, as has been the case for the last 15 months
Thank you.
or so.
I just want to move on so I don't take all Reshma's time because I've got 2 or 3 more. Very briefly, you mentioned cruise tourism. Other than opening a discussion, which you've made clear that's what you want to see, does the PPM have a specific policy itself in terms of cruise and where you see the future of cruise here going?
I'm happy to speak to that. We made it very public in our manifesto that cruise berthing facility was not going to be a discussion. We also talked about where we were with the pandemic and COVID, that we had to reevaluate. If you look at what we have done, by example, we formed a committee. The last meeting, or the meeting before the last, there was actually a picture in the press of the 50-odd people that had regularly gotten together. It was led by Health Services, the Cayman Islands Airport, Cal, Border Control, Ministry and Department of Tourism, CITA, representatives from Northside, from East End Tourism, Cayman Brac, Little Cayman, tour operators, taxi drivers, Northside boat operators, and the restaurant sector. So all of those were put in one room and discussed about where we were and what we had to do with the COVID issue. What the government did was to provide opportunity to move people, Caymanian people, into stayover.
What's your
I'm going to answer your
long-term
question.
policy? Sorry.
So we had job fairs, scholarships, internships, hospitality school strengthening, UCCI classes, partnership with work, to make sure that Caymanians were able to retool and reskill and get back in the industry. Our thoughts on cruise is this is the first time that we as a country have been in a position that we didn't have cruise vessels, 15, 20, 25,000 people a day visiting our shores and bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars to economic benefit. So the reason we said that it was time to sit and look at a policy, if the policy is, and I give you an example, 10,000 people a day maximum, cruise companies that commit to come 12 months out of the year rather than 4 months out of the year, high spend individuals that visit the shores and would actually spend more than the 10,000 people would spend more than 25,000 people. I give you that example as that could very well be a policy that would come out of this, meaning that you would have less people arriving on cruise, and we would take the same dollar value and move and look at what the economic benefit is for stayover. But the conversation, we had started having it, but it needs to be driven forward, that when you go to the cruise lines or they come to you to talk about what you're going to offer them as a destination, that you're very clear of what you're going to offer and what you want from them coming here.
Fair dues, thank you. And one more sort of tourism-related question, which was who decided that it was going to be a good idea to let the producers of F-Boy Island come here to film, given our reputation's already a little bit troubled with the offshore sector?
That didn't come through my ministry.
Certainly didn't come. I'm not aware. Wasn't aware of it. Certainly not. I'm not
I understand
aware
it
of
was
it.
a thing. I thought it was either Ministry of Tourism or Ministry of International Trade. I understand Eric Bush was in charge, but this wasn't a political decision, it was a civil service decision.
Yeah.
This never came to us while we were in government.
Okay, thank you. And finally, this is just as an aside because it's on Wednesday. Do you foresee any issues being chair of the Public Accounts Committee, that you're going to be dealing with your own stuff, as it were, and that you've got a fairly inexperienced committee, if you see what I mean? Because that means that if you recuse yourself, who's left to know the rules? Do you understand what I mean? So I'm just wondering what you had to say about that.
It's a perfectly fair question, Wendy. I have considered it, and I had some fair discussions with the Auditor General, particularly about it, since she does support me in my role as chair. And what we discussed and agreed that it would be entirely appropriate for me to go ahead and chair the meeting, but I would not participate in any way in the examination of the witnesses who will come before the the committee when we meet. So that is the way we will approach it. And I will not participate. I'll be hands off. I'll just conduct the meeting.
Okay, great.
It must be said also to Wendy that Barbara Conley and myself has also served on PAC before.
Oh, right, I didn't realise that. I knew Barbara was the only, but that's what I was thinking, that if you left, it was, I didn't realise that you'd served in the past on
On the desert, yeah.
the, all right, okay,
As chair.
thank you. That's all I've got, thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Reshma, Ragoonath, Cayman Compass. I'm going to start kind of working backward. Wendy covered a couple of things that I wanted to cover, but was the September date something that you had agreed on prior to the election, or is this coming out of what you've seen now?
Good question. It was not a date that we had set some time back. As we said all along, it was contingent on how the vaccination program evolved. We set the sort limits of 75 to 80% of the population as that sort of critical point where we felt we could look to reopening. We know now that we are getting there, or just about there, in meeting that kind of target. So we're saying now it's time really to have that conversation and to have those plans put into place. And, you know, we think the time is right. I think the country is more than ready for it. And we think we can safely do it and still keep our people protected. The way out of this has always been getting our people vaccinated. And we are achieving that and will continue to achieve it. So it's time to look at it. September 1st really just gives the industry, gives everybody, including government and all of the agencies, time to prepare to receive visitors back.
With the UK going...
If you draw the parallel to when we reopened the economy during the COVID shelter-in-place period, we reopened it based on the amount of people we got tested. So that was the key to reopening. We always said we needed to test X amount of people within this industry, X amount of people within that industry before we could reopen in those industries. And the same thing now for reopening our borders has to do with the amount of people vaccinated. So it's the same science that we followed from the very beginning.
Okay, thank you for that. Given that the UK has extended its lockdown, hypothetically, if we work towards that date, do you anticipate that we will have the kind of visitor numbers that can really restart the engine for the tourism sector?
I think that the biggest point we can make is that the opening has to be a phased opening, and it has to be managed in the proper way. There's no possible way to just open up the borders one day and say we can have 55,000 people come for the month. The September is the lowest arrival month of the year historically. So from that standpoint, we would expect, based on the data, that we would get somewhere around 8,000 to 9,000 people for September. Right now, if you look at what we're geared to accept now, is around 4,000 to 5,000 a month when you manage the Cayman Airway flights, the BA flights, and the private jets that come in. That's what we're able to manage. So it would say to you that there's no possible way that you could double or triple that until you prepare yourself to do it. So if the decision's made this week, next week, you need the 6-week period to start strengthening your tools for arrival. And think about what happens. The first thing you have to do is have somebody come here. So you have to market to them. Then you have to make it easy for them to fly here. And then the airlines have to be involved. They need 6 weeks to look at how they're going to put seats back into the destination. Then you have to bring them to an airport, and you have to do the proper checks, the social distancing, whatever the science says is best practice at that time. Now the other part of it is that we have the opportunity to look at destinations, us as a destination, to look at gateways that are safer than others. So if we manage it and look at North America is the safest part of gateways right now. And then if you drill down and you say Miami, Tampa, and 3 other gateways, they are the ones that have the least amount of COVID globally. So that's where we want our guests to come from. and we have the ability far enough out to target that market and advertise in that market and try to build our market into that. So I use that example to say, think about the difference between saying this is something that we are looking at to do in the right way, to phase it and build it over a period of time for high net worth individuals, visitors and families and friends, 3-generational, all the ones that we've built success over. If we have the proper amount of time, by the time we get to high season in December, we should be bringing our repeat guests back. We should be bringing people that are familiar with the product, and we should be able to do it in a way that it can be managed with the right amount of people in the industry. So we would hope to get 65-70% occupancy in high season around Christmas time. But if you don't start now, you're not only not going to get that, but you're going to lose that sector of your visitors to other destinations that are open. And the example is when you had the Cat 5 hurricanes in the Eastern Caribbean 2 years in a row, their visitors were not able to go back the following year, so they looked at other places to visit. If we're not able to accommodate that really strong sector that we had built into repeat guests, they will start looking for other places to go, number one. Number two, we've been absolutely well off with the ownership we have, but also owners will start looking at other opportunities if we're not able to start accommodating the Caymanian workers and the Caymanian ownership.
I just want to say that we're not here, as you've determined by now, because we want to try to make the government look bad, or we're here because what triggered us to be here is the 70% and reaching the 70%. That triggered us in action. Of course, we allowed the government their opportunity and their chance to do their jobs. It must be known that one of the aims in terms of talking about herd immunity earlier, it's to keep the vulnerable groups who cannot get vaccinated due to health conditions like allergic reactions to the vaccine safe and protected from the disease. Some people are suggesting a total of 85% that you need, where the variants are spreading worldwide. In places like New York City, where 25% of the people of the population seem to have antibodies, they will reach their herd immunity at 60% of vaccinated people. So what we must take in consideration is that the government, when we decided that the Pfizer was the vaccine that we wanted, it's shown that 88% it's effective against the Delta variant, 88%. So thankfully, we never went with the AstraZeneca, which is only shown to be 60% effective against that strain. So we are here trying to do our job as a good opposition, trying to put ideas forward. September 1st is well within, based on the rate of persons getting vaccinated in Cayman. I think we'll be well over the 75% by September 1st. And it also gives us the time that the tourism industry asked for. They wanted 60 days clear before an announcement was made.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McTaggart, just going back, you mentioned that you're opening the door to working with the government to assist in helping them to formulate this plan. Have you reached out to any member of the PACT, sorry, to partner with them? To partner with them to help formulate this plan?
I have not reached out to anyone specifically at this point in time.
Do you intend to?
What? Yeah, so I'm going to just say,
We just
should
say
be the other way around.
The other way around. They obviously need help. They should ask.
Well, sometimes it's always good to extend the branch too. Moving on to global taxation, Mr. McLaughlin, since you have the mic, I'll give this one to you as a shadow minister for financial services. Just your thoughts on the announcement from the G7 on the agreement on a possible global tax minimum and its implications for Cayman.
Yes, this is another area, I think, where there has been a deafening silence from the government about this issue. This is not entirely unexpected. It's been in discussions for years, the possibility of some global standard which fixes corporate tax rates at a minimum. But I think even though this is not obviously without concern, I think we are a long ways away from this becoming anything approaching a reality. And the G7 themselves, I think, is a good starting point for discussions. But particularly as the United States is involved, it is not a simple matter at all to deal with a matter like taxation and the state's rights in determining those things. President Biden, doesn't have the luxury of say, the Chancellor of Germany in being able to make the decision. So I think based on what I've read and seen and the briefings that we've had from some of the experts, not just locally but internationally, it is something that we obviously have to take into account, but it is not something that is going to occur immediately or even in the relatively short term. But the other factor that I think can give us some confidence is that Cayman's tax neutrality is but one factor in making Cayman the attractive place for international financial business and transactions to occur. Over the course of the last 50 years, we have evolved into one of the most sophisticated jurisdictions in the world, have some of the best minds who are engaged in the business of providing financial services to the world here. And that, in of itself, is probably the preeminent factor that will ensure Cayman's continued prosperity and indeed dominance in certain areas in the financial services sector, particularly in the area of funds. So as we talk to people across industry, everyone says, yes, this is another consideration, another factor that we have to be concerned about, something that is in the long term, assuming there's global agreement on it, which is a lot of assumptions, believe me. The G7 doesn't determine what happens all over the world. I've lost my train of thought now. This is but one other hurdle that we have to deal with. As long as I have been around, when I first became engaged in dealing with these international issues when I was president of the Bar Association back in 1998, each new wave of issues that are raised, you hear the doomsdayers declaring that is certainly going to be the demise of Cayman's financial services industry. The record proves that we have risen to every challenge, and indeed the industry has grown from strength to strength, and in terms of volume over the course of the last 30 years or thereabouts that we've had to deal with these challenges. As I said earlier, the level of sophistication in our industry ensures that we have some of the very best minds to address these issues. And certainly the view that we have from the key players in industry and from the experts is that this will be but one other factor that Cayman has to deal with, but it is certainly not going to mean the demise or even the slowing down of the amount of business that Cayman conducts or is conducted through Cayman in terms of international financial services.
So then, therefore, do you view this as another reason to accelerate the border reopening plan, or no, given the confidence that the financial services industry
No,
has?
I don't. I think everybody's affected by the fact that you can't move freely. But I think the world has gotten used to dealing with business through Zoom. So no, I don't tie the two things together at all.
Okay, great. So, Mr. McTaggart, you were the former finance minister. You've proposed a stipend of $2,000. Given the current economic climate, do you think that's a feasible figure with borders continuing to close?
I certainly do believe, Reshma, that the funding is there and it's available to do so. You will recall during the campaign that my esteemed colleague to my left made that statement at one of our campaign things. And what we have to look at, I think, is just how long we have been closed and how long our people have been suffering. And that suffering, Reshma, just continues to grow with each passing month. And even upping it to $2,000 a month, it is a very significant sum when you multiply it out in terms of
Didn't we leave
their numbers.
400 million in cash?
The fact of the matter is that it is but a fraction of the income that these people continue, our citizens continue to lose. We're not talking about necessarily a extended period of time for this, because I think once we start to reopen the border, people start to come in, you would give people a bit of a chance to start to earn money again before you seek to reduce it. And I don't think that it is going to be, that it is a situation where you can just turn the spigot off 1 month and say no more. You're going to have to continue, let tourism build. As it builds, you ratchet down the stipend. That's how I would view it. That's how I would probably act, and what I would suggest to my colleagues were I in the cabinet. So I think we can see light at the end of the tunnel. And I think we just need to go that extra step, that extra mile, and make sure we do a little bit more for these people to give them that extra comfort and that extra few dollars of money.
Okay, thank you.
Reshma, if I could just address the other issue which is causing major concern, not just in the tourism industry, but more broadly across the business community. And that is the fact, is the government going to continue the pensions holiday, or are they come the 1st of July going to insist that everyone has to resume making pension contributions? I mean, we're in the middle of June. I mean, businesses have to be able to plan and to make arrangements. I mean, the law requires that the employer pay half of the pension contribution. For some of these businesses, that amounts to a significant sum of money that they have to find every month. So I just, honestly, I can't understand why there is continued silence on issues like that seem to us so absolutely straightforward. We can't, and we ought not to insist that pension contributions resume now with the borders still mostly closed, and with the tourism industry in the situation it is. It is a straightforward matter. It would have taken us maybe half an hour to discuss, and we would have made the decision. Continue it at least until the end of the year, and then we take stock come November whether or not it is feasible to be able to resume, to require businesses to resume making pension contributions.
Okay. My final question is
sorry, Reshma. Just, I think so many of us have found that what we call this bubble that we're living in is almost business as usual, but we keep forgetting that there are Caymanian-owned t-shirt stores and tourism-related stores on the waterfront that have been closed now for over a year. There are Caymanian-owned water sports operators that their boats are sitting and having to be maintained, and they do not have the stipend is just enough to help them maintain their own bills, but not to help with their staff or keep the business afloat. And it's one thing we recognize that we have to keep our tourism-related businesses alive, that when we do open our borders, that we have the level of service and quality of providers that we had prior. But also, how can we forget about the people, the actual people that are suffering? And you know, the water sports, the last grant they got was part of the business grants that we did through the Cayman Islands Center for Business Development that we did in January. I think they got $3,000 then. This has been over a year that they have been without business. Many of them without business. Some of the luxury ones are doing okay, or not okay, I shouldn't say. They get some business on the long weekends, etc. But there's an entire sector of people out there. There are business owners who have not been able to get any more help in the last 6 months, who own t-shirt shops and craft shops. You got the craft people from the craft markets, and again, all of the water sports north sound operators. These are the people that we've forgotten about. The guys that used to be down at the port doing the coconuts and the conch shells, etc. This is how they made their living. I know, you know, one gentleman who put his child through university there on the port selling coconuts. You know, what is he doing now? And what help are we giving them, and what hope are we giving them in failing to give them a date to aspire towards? And they understand that if tourists that are looking for, that would be our visitors looking for a winter vacation this year, and the Cayman Islands is silent on a reopening date, are now going to start to book somewhere else.
Yep.
So if we wait until the end of summer to say we're going to open next month, A, it's not enough time for the industry to gear up for it, and two, people would have already made their plans to go somewhere else. And I think, as mentioned earlier, you know, we see from our other islands around the Caribbean that were affected by hurricanes 2 years in a row, how difficult it is to build back that clientele after a 2-year interruption. If we continue to be silent on this matter, we will not see any tourists returning to this island until next year, and it will be much more difficult to us to even start to build back the numbers that we saw pre-COVID.
Okay, thank you. I'll save my question now. That's it.
Good afternoon, John Flemming with Real Cayman News. I just have one question. If the PAC government takes your advice and open up in September, do you think that we need to follow new protocols such as mask mandates or social distancing? I know that the Turks and Caicos opened up and they have mask mandates and curfews in place. So do you think we'll need to follow curfews or mask mandates?
Go ahead.
No, we don't. Once we get to 75 to 80%, and we insist that those who come here are vaccinated or have to go through quarantine, we think that we are as safe as you can possibly get in this situation. There are no absolute guarantees in anything in life, and I think that most people will understand and appreciate how conservative and how careful we were when we were in government about these issues. Believe me, we are not making these proposals recklessly. We've thought long and hard about them, as we did way back when. If we were in government, I can tell you we would have announced the date probably 4 weeks ago, once we saw that the numbers were starting to get to where we wanted and that they were likely to be achieved by the 1st of September.
Thank you. I just have one more question. Aruba recently created a vaccine passport in partnership with, I think, JetBlue. Would you recommend that the Cayman Islands government partner with one of the airlines to create our own passport?
Right now, IATA, which is a global company, regulatory, is looking at a global passport for vaccinations. I think that we would only do the right thing as a country to look at an opportunity to make sure that the passport that you bring here that shows you've had vaccine is actually valid and can be mandated.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for being here this afternoon. Just final comments from me with regard to events and our meeting this afternoon. This week we're going to get a lot more vaccines, so I just want to encourage everyone who, when the vaccines come, if you haven't been vaccinated, please take the opportunity and do your part. If not for yourself, do it for your family and for the rest of the country to allow us to get to the point where we can safely reopen. So I want to thank you all again for being here, and I look forward to the next time when we shall meet. One moment before we go.
Not departing from what we started back in the pandemic, prayer and scripture. Philippians 4:19, and my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Jesus Christ. Gentle Savior, we thank you for your word, your promises, and your commitment. Lord, today we place all our burdens of delays, disappointments, fears, setbacks, and our finances before you. Father, I ask you to bless the civil service, the government, the opposition, the people of this wonderful country, the press. Father, you are God who promised to supply all of our needs. Today we stand in faith, believing that all things will work together for our good. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.